What does this airplane, and this airplane all have in common? Let's find out on Celebrating Aviation with Mike Mashat. What these three airplanes have in common is they were all captured on camera by aviation photographers. We're going to be looking at some stunning aviation photography in this presentation. What we're not going to be doing is giving you tips and techniques. There are many excellent videos on YouTube about how to become an aviation photographer, all the f-stops and apertures and everything you need to know about taking pictures of airplanes. So we're not going to be talking about getting good composition or setting up good clean backgrounds for your photos or avoiding distractions while you're shooting your favorite airliners. What we will be doing, however, is showing you some of the most stunning aviation photography by contemporary aviation photographers that you've ever seen. We'll also be looking at some archival historic images as well. So how does it all begin? Well, it starts right here, a young love of aviation and aircraft. Now, when it comes to photography, I'm strictly in the duffer category compared to the professionals whose work you're about to see. But I do know we all share some common roots. Like this, before I could see a real airplane, I took photos of models like this airliner, complete with ground equipment. And yes, this is the 1961 Revell kit. I was that airplane geek kid who actually sent 10 cents to 4223 Glencoe Avenue in California to get Swiss Air decals. I'm still shooting models today, but now they are treasured collectibles. But that's a story for another video. When I was old enough to make the 90-minute trek by bus and subway to Idlewild Airport in New York, I was using my mom's trusty Kodak Star Flash camera to take pictures of airliners, complete with ground equipment. When I started taking flying lessons at age 16, I graduated to a Kodak Instamatic. Remember those? Entering the professional art world, I was now using a 35mm Pentax Spotmatic to research my artwork, and eventually Canon camera systems. When I became a flight-rated Air Force artist, I was taking air-to-air photos, mainly to research paintings for the Air Force art program and for other special projects. And of course, I had to take the obligatory selfie during an F-16 max performance takeoff while climbing straight up at 30,000 feet per minute. However, we are going to talk about some basic terminology. For instance, aerial photo. This is believed to be the first aerial photo ever taken from another aircraft, showing the Advanced Wright Flyer during its European demonstration tour in April 1909. This amazing photograph was taken near Rome, Italy, and the photo ship, a hot air balloon. The airliner view. This is mainly for spotters at airports. They like to see the side of the airplane so they can count the windows and doors and see the registration number. The wide-angle view accentuates things that are closest to the camera. The telephoto view does the exact opposite. Things that are closest tend to be smaller, and things that are farther away tend to be larger. This is called telephoto distortion. The ant's eye view is demonstrated here. This is Tom Cruise's SR-72 Dark Star, taken by my friend Craig Caston at Edwards Air Force Base. And air-to-air is taking pictures of airplanes from other airplanes. I'd like to acknowledge the military photographers. These are the guys who were there at the very beginning, capturing history like the world's first aerial refueling in 1929. Kodachrome became available in World War II. And all around the globe, aviation photographers were capturing stunning imagery like this, capturing the proud cruise of a V-bomber. Air Force photographers taking photos like this. I always wondered what chase plane was taking this photo, and it had to be a two-seat F-104 that captured this shot of the rocket-boosted NF-104 just before it literally rocketed away from the photo plane. Navy photographers. Boy, all those great carrier action shots. Those men and women do a beautiful job. And NASA photographers and the people of flight test research captured images like this for us to enjoy. a nod to the corporate photographers. These men and women were responsible for creating compelling imagery of their company's aircraft, whether it was Republic Aviation in Farmingdale, New York, Chance Vought in Dallas, Texas, or Douglas Aircraft at Edwards Air Force Base, California. Let's meet the gentleman who took this stunning photograph of the B-66. His name is Don Adams. Don was a Douglas photographer from 1951 to 1967, working in photo labs and for corporate advertising and marketing. I recently had the pleasure of meeting Don, a joyous soul at 92 years young, and the personification of the true greatness of the Douglas Aircraft Company in its heyday. Let's look at some of Don's magnificent photography. Here's an A3D Sky Warrior over the Pacific. Love that boat. And this A4D Skyhawk is shown over Catalina Island. These photos were taken from the back seat of that Lockheed TV-2 seen in the previous photo. This is a regal photo of the epitome of Douglas prop liners, the Intercontinental DC-7C, during an engine run-up at Santa Monica, where all the great DC airliners were built from the mid-1930s through the late 1950s. Here's Don in the right seat of the Douglas Bell 47G photocopter, preparing to depart Santa Monica. Now, why would a company have its own helicopter? Well, to take photos like this. What's that, you say? Can we show these airplanes from a higher altitude? Sure, no problem. Don was aboard the copter in April 1958, shooting the rollout of the new DC-8 jetliner at Long Beach. If you look at the lower right-hand edge of this photo, you can see several photographers walking toward the jet, one of whom took this photo of Mr. Donald Douglas in the cockpit, with Adams seen above in the Bell 47. Later this day, this formation was being assembled on the East Ramp, and here's the classic Douglas family portrait as seen from the helicopter. And then there were the transports, like this turboprop C-133 Cargo Master, and the great airliners like this KLM DC-7C flying over the Santa Monica Mountains north of Malibu. When I asked Don what camera plane he was flying in to take these photos, I was surprised to learn that they were shot from this airplane, Paul Mance's iconic B-25 camera ship named the Smasher. That's for all the bugs they had to keep wiping off those large photo windows. Now, when I think of company photographers during my years in the Douglas Art Department during the 1980s, this gentleman comes to mind, Mr. Harry Gann. Harry began his career as an engineer and evolved into company historian, primarily photographing U.S. Navy Douglas airplanes and the Naval Demonstration Squadron's A4 Skyhawks, taking photos like this. And this is a perfect formation. Look at the trailing edges of the aircraft number 2 and 3. Just incredible. How about this photo? Says it all. And Harry spent countless hours in the rear cockpit of this airplane, Blue Angels number 7, where he produced many amazing images of the team's aircraft, like this one and this one. And no, this is not photoshopped, but rather the two solo pilots flying the Fortis maneuver with landing gear and tailhooks extended. This is one of my all-time favorites of Harry's photos, the Delta Loop, and the ultimate example of aerial precision, the Delta landing. Contract and independent photographers. Our first independent or freelance photographer is Tony Landis, whom I first met in June 1990. 3 months earlier, unbeknownst to either of us, we'd both been assigned to cover the same event on 2 different coasts, the 68-minute transcontinental record flight of the Lockheed SR-71 Blackbird. I painted the takeoff at Palmdale, California, while Tony shot the airplane's high-speed, low pass at Dulles Airport in Washington, D.C. Years later, he was hired by NASA's Dryden Flight Research Center at Edwards Air Force Base, where he soon distinguished himself with outstanding photography, like this NB-52 takeoff carrying the X-38 Space Rescue Concept Demonstrator. Tony's images had a distinctive look that captured the visual essence, if not the personality, of each and every aircraft. He was assigned to photograph Brigadier General Chuck Yeager for the 50th anniversary of supersonic flight in 1997, with Yeager posing in front of glamorous Glennis II, an F-15B. In one of my favorite stories, Yeager asked Tony, "So what do you want me to do?" To which Tony answered, "General, just look like a test pilot." Mission accomplished. Here's an interesting contrast in front views and more stunning NASA images, including this overhead shot of some very exotic looking test aircraft. Over the years, Tony documented a number of very neat projects that we had together, like my B-1 flight at Palmdale, this stunning cover photo for Vet magazine, and my flight in the F-104 at Mojave. A very special shout out and thanks to Tony for so vividly capturing these great aviation memories. Today, Landis is associated with Air Force history operations. Our next photographer is a true pioneer in this industry, Mr. Jay Miller. Jay is seen here with the all-electric, autonomously piloted Airbus A3 Vahana. In addition to his talents as a photographer, Jay is a prolific author and leading expert on the fabled X-planes of the mid-20th century. His publishing company, Aerofax, created books and magazines in the 1980s and 90s that were considered the gold standard of aviation literature, many of which I avidly used to research my very own artwork before ever meeting Jay. Let's look at some of his superb photography. What do you get when you combine a legendary Grumman Bearcat Reno racer with a raging Texas thunderstorm? Visual artistry. For you history buffs, this is the ultra-rare, one-of-a-kind experimental Vought V-137 Flying Pancake, which was built with wooden fabric construction and first flew in 1942. How's this for a unique formation? The Temco Super Pinto at top with a North American F-51 Mustang in U.S. Air Force colors. Look at that prop disc. Here's a Bell tilt rotor concept, the F-35 Lightning II, a home-built aircraft. And talk about formation. This is perfection in two aspects. It's a perfect photo and a perfect formation. Kudos to those pilots and Jay. Here's a dramatic shot of a very historic sailplane, the Sisu-1A. This is the sister ship to the record-setting airplane that became the first glider to fly more than 1,000 kilometers in 1964. That airplane was flown by Al Parker from Odessa, Texas to Nebraska, and is now displayed in the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum. What a beautiful photo. Next up, Chad Slattery, hailing from Southern California. Chad brings a special look to his exquisite photography that you're about to see. As Jay Miller's partner in crime, Chad and Jay were the co-founders of ISAP, the International Society for Aviation Photography. If you have to photograph the Convair B-58 Hustler, here's a different way of doing it. This spectacular image was used as the cover photo for Air and Space Smithsonian magazine and typifies the unique point of view that Slattery brings to all his photos. Chad was closely associated for many years with the great Clay Lacy, using Lacy's specially outfitted Learjet camera planes to create his photographic magic. Mentioned in Chad's book, Inside Aviation Photography, published by Amherst Press, is that the Dassault Falcon 50 is his favorite business jet. This one poses for the classic Chad Slattery dusk ram shot. Also receiving that treatment is this executive Boeing 757-200. And yes, this airplane really is called the Boeing Salmon 30 Salmon. Now here I've taken the liberty of cropping this Embraer Legacy bizjet to show you the difference between an aircraft portrait, which is beautiful in its own right, and photographic artistry. This is one of the best examples of using negative space, or the image area that is not the airplane, to create a composition of exquisite proportions. Look at the right winglet, perfectly overlapping the hillside. Just beautiful. Boeing's X-47B is the shape of the future for carrier-based Navy aircraft. And people are a favorite subject for Chad as well. Here's aerobatic pilot and FAA Instructor of the Year, Judy Phelps, inverted in her Pitts S2B in a photo taken by a remote camera triggered by the pilot, I'm sorry. Chad's photo is printed this way, but when you're flying inverted, the ground is always up. Which way do you like better? Mention it in the comments. And here's a shot of yours truly. Chad took this as I was putting the finishing touches on my mural, Fly Navy, at the Museum of Flying in Santa Monica, California. And speaking of the museum, may I introduce to you newly minted Alaska Airlines pilot, James Babinski. 10 years ago, James was an enthusiastic teenager, an aviation buff working in guest services at the museum. We would go to dinner at the airport eatery where he would talk about his dream of becoming an airline pilot. And after acquiring all his ratings and logging countless hours in corporate aircraft, James was hired by Alaska Airlines this year and is now a fully qualified Boeing 737 first officer. It's a wonderful story about following your dreams with lots of dedication and hard work. And why do I mention it? Because James was also a very talented photographer who really knew his way around LAX. Positioned in a Robinson R-44 helicopter hovering directly above the airport, he took this amazing shot of the iconic In-N-Out burger adjacent to LAX and capturing a Singapore Airlines A380 Super Jumbo in the process. I love this photo. This is the nanosecond that the tires hit the runway. The tire smoke isn't even up yet, but talk about timing. And this is what I believe you call over the numbers, as an Air France A380 lands on runway 24 right, the only runway in the world to have its very own Facebook group, but some beautiful photography from James. And some basic fundamentals that you've seen in these photographs, just to wrap up: the use of cool and warm colors, light and dark shapes, unusual subject matter, light aircraft on dark backgrounds, dark aircraft on light backgrounds, and Air Force history, modern Air Force jets, Navy aircraft, and warbirds. Aviation photographers will take us into the future and to infinity and beyond. It can be an exhausting job, but is it worth it? Well, when you can get a photo like this, the answer is absolutely. And there you have it, a look at aviation photography and some of the art and aviation of the world's best contemporary aviation photographers today. Special thanks to all the photographers in this presentation and the great folks who support the channel and make these presentations possible. I want to thank you for celebrating aviation with Mike Machat. It's a joy to bring these episodes to you. And if you haven't subscribed, we'd love to have you on board. Please do hit the like button on the way out. It does help us with YouTube. And as always, until next time, take care.